According to reports from the New York Post, in 2016, an average of nearly 4,000 prisoners were left behind bars because they simply couldn't make bail. Well, the Bronx Freedom Fund organization is about raising funds and keeping clients out of jail as they wait for trial. Now, here to tell us more about the organization, we welcome the project director from the Bronx Freedom Fund, Ezra Ritchin, and we thank you so much for coming and sharing with us.
Thanks for having me, Daren.
Good. So let's talk about this here because it's some people feel this is good, other people feel it's controversial, but you guys are really bailing people out, literally.
Yeah.
And in the borough of the Bronx, more than 1,000 people?
Yeah, we bailed out more than 1,000 people in the Bronx alone.
What's the basis for why you feel this is important?
Well, I think there's a couple reasons. The first is about the legal grounding for the pretrial system. So in our system, you're innocent until proven guilty. But what happens if you can't pay bail is that you get sent to either Rikers Island in the Bronx, which is known as, also known as Torture Island. It's one of the most notoriously violent jails in the country. It's called our little Guantanamo Bay. Or your other option is you're sent to what's called the Boat. It's a military barge that was brought up from New Orleans and housed off of Hunts Point in the Bronx between the Department of Sanitation and a wholesale fish market. And that houses another 900 men. We're putting people on a boat or on an island. And those are the options for people who cannot pay bail. While they are presumed innocent in the eyes of the law, they're sitting in some of the most violent jails in the country.
But how do you argue against those people who say, listen, bail is used also to really hold somebody who really, as a system that may really need to be held?
Right, so I think the theoretical grounding of bail is that if you put up some money, then you'll have some skin in the game. So if you show up to all your court dates, you'll get that money back, and it'll be like an incentive for you to come back to your court dates. Our results kind of flip that theory on its head because our clients do not have any money on the line. It's our money on the line and not theirs. So they don't have that monetary incentive to come back to court.
Right.
But what happens is 95% of our clients come back to all of their court dates. And in one of the most backlog courts in the country, that can be 15, 20 court dates over many years. So that kind of proves that money is not necessary as an incentive for returning to court. What we do is provide timely phone reminders, text messages, and things along those lines to make people aware of their court dates and support them pre-trial.
How do you make the choice of who that you're going to give this, bail out?
That's a great question. So we're limited by New York State law to providing bail for people who are accused of misdemeanors, which is the lower level of charges, and when bail is set at $2,000 or less. So that's our kind of first big limitation from the state. And after that, we're looking for people who have ties to the local community in the Bronx and have families here, have jobs here, and also people who we think are therefore likely to come back to court, because the way bail works is if you come back to your court dates, you get the money back. So what happens is we will provide bail for someone who can't afford it. They'll come back to all their court dates, and we'll take those funds at the end and use it to assist someone else who's also caught in this situation.
So so pretty much $2,000, and then those people who have misdemeanors are the ones who are categorized. So when you put this out there to help people, what's the response you get?
It's an overwhelmingly positive response because I think people don't truly understand the way that our system works. I think we all believe in the presumption of innocence, that you're innocent until you're proven guilty. But what happens in the South Bronx is for people who have bail set at $1,000 or less, so for some people that's a trip to an ATM machine, but for people in the South Bronx who have bail set at $1,000 or less, 86% of them will end up going to jail for their inability to pay that bail. And I don't think people understand that it's these small amounts of money that are really determining who is and who isn't in jail, while people are presumed innocent in the eyes of the law.
So as you've worked, as you said, it's mandated by New York State, and New York State has assisted in this. Talk to us about that component and what the state has said and how others have really chimed in this. Yeah,
so I think the reaction from the state has been a positive one. We've seen the law pass that allows us to pay bails of $2,000 or less for misdemeanors, and there's legislators out there who want to expand the reach of bail funds. I think what we're really doing is kind of acting as a mirror for the system to show these are the people who are being kept in jail, and trying to see, as you mentioned, 4,000 people on Rikers Island who can't pay bail are housed there. Every year it's about 40,000 people who are held in jail on bail because they can't afford a payment. So I think what we're doing is kind of showing the public and showing the state what the system is doing.
So when you talk about the 40,000 that are actually held in jail and can't afford bail, are these people with misdemeanor offenses, or are these just
Oh,
the grand total?
that's the grand total.
Okay, that's the grand total. So we don't know exactly how many are really with misdemeanor offenses.
With misdemeanors, it's a smaller amount, but it's somewhere around 10,000 every year.
And so, as people are watching right now, somebody's saying, "Listen, I may, how do I get assistance? What do I get?" They may have a loved one or somebody.
Right.
What do they do?
Right. So we get a lot of calls from Rikers Island. We get a lot of calls from the boat, and we get a lot of calls from loved ones. The best course of action is to talk to the attorney, because the attorney is the one who has the information and the access to connect the families with us.
And so they have the opportunity to do that, and then afterwards you make a determination. Is it a group? How does the selection process work?
Well, it varies case by case, but we work as a unit, and we try to work very quickly in providing bail, because what happens is in those first few hours and days in jail is when things really fall apart. So if you have a mental health problem, I know we'll hear about mental health later in the segment, but you might not get access to that medication during those first few hours and days in jail. If you have a job and you don't show up for a few days because you're on Rikers, unable to pay a $500 bail, you might end up losing that job. And if you're in a homeless shelter and you don't sign in for 24 or 48 hours, then you might forfeit that space in the shelter and end up living on the street. So we try to act quickly to assist our clients.
And so, once again, I want to uplift. You said 96% of your clients actually do return for court, and so they, even though they don't have their own money on the line, they still do that. And so, I think a lot of people feel like, if somebody else's money is on the line, that I don't have to necessarily comply. But you're saying that you're getting that compliance.
Right, and that compliance, I think, begs the question of why do we need this cash bail system that is unaffordable and keeps people in jail in the first place? If you provide support to people, if you remind them about their court dates, and you really treat them as human beings in a system that so often dehumanizes, then they will come back to court. And I think it really, as I said, raises the question of why we need this system in the first place.
Are you optimistic that the system will change?
I'm cautiously optimistic that the system will change, yes.
Is there reform on the way? Has there been some legal reform that you did?
Yeah, so several states around the country are in the process of attempting to change their pretrial statutes, and some have. And New York State might be doing that in 2018 in the next legislative session, but we'll see. We'll see.
We'll continue to find out. Well, Ezra, Richard, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us.
Thanks for having me.
For people who want more information, I guess they can go to the BronxFreedomFund.org, and that's where they can find out. All right, so there you go. If you want more information, you can just go to BronxFreedomFund.org, and you can get in touch with Ezra and his staff, and hopefully get some answers and some possible assistance. Thanks so much for coming to share with us.
Thanks for having me.
Enlightening us. Listen, we want you to stay tuned, because we're going to come back with more open. Stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this.